Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, wherever you are. It's Waity, Lightheart, No BS Rants, Digital Republic, Prosperity and Health Alliance. We're at an early session today, 4 p.m. I'm over here on the iPhone Live, so we got a little bit of a different view if you're on the Facebook Live. We're also on YouTube, and we are here, of course, on our Zoom call like we are each and every week. We got a great episode for you today. It's a big one. A victim or victor? What is the price of your belief system? How is it inputting you? How is it influencing your life? I sent an email out the other day on the weekend. I was thinking about this, and I think it's a really important topic, and one that certainly is something I've seen emerged in this world of social media that we find ourselves in this kind of what would I say, environment where everybody has a channel. And I think there's some good things to it, but I also think there's the bad things to it. And that is a variety of things. But right now, I think let's just take a overlook of what's happening. And this is going to relate to your business. It's going to relate to your relationships. It's going to relate to your life. Okay, this is why this topic is so important for you to consider. Now, I'm not here to champion the cause of victims. I'm not here to champion the causes of oppressors. I'm not here to make a political statement or to support any group or organization or make any sort of legal, moral, or ethical judgments. That's not what my role is here today. What my role is here today as a coach for the Digital Republic, for the Prosperity and Health Alliance, and as a citizen of the world, as a human being, not a white guy from Canada, none of that stuff. Okay, you can yes, you can identify me with all these groups or whatever you want to do, and these sort of things. But that's not what my goal is. My goal today is for whatever a group that you identify with, whatever organization you identify with, whatever your philosophy, whatever that is you're trying to be in the world, that you think about how you came to those conclusions, and that you think about how you come to your beliefs, and what is the consequences of the beliefs that you have today. What is the consequence of those beliefs? What is the consequences? And I see some of the people clicking on Facebook Live. Hi, how you doing, guys? Appreciate it. I won't be able to answer all your responses here because I've got 3 different channels. What are the consequences of those beliefs? What are the consequences of those environments? So let me back the truck up. I'm gonna introduce a couple of ideas here, and I would like for you to write. Maybe you have a piece of paper like I have here, and I'm going to show this real quick. You can see this right quick, and it's probably all backwards because it's always a mirror image on these things, but I wrote this down because it was kind of like I was thinking about this a lot, and how do people come up with who they are, what they believe. So I have a spiritual teacher, and he has a saying, and it says, environment is stronger than will. And you'll get where I'm going to this. So if you actually be 100% honest, that many of the things that you hold to be true, the many of the things that you believe, the lenses, if you will, that you look on the world is directly related to the environment from which you grow up in. For example, if I grew up in a town in, I don't know, maybe in Afghanistan, or if I grew up in Saudi Arabia, or I grew up in many of the sub-Sahara places of the world where there is a predominance of, say, Islam, that I would probably share those beliefs. This is not saying that that's wrong or bad or anything else. I'm just saying I would probably, because that's an environment where it's the most dominant belief. If I grew up in India, in certain environments, I would probably have a Hindu philosophy. There's about 100 different forms of religion over there, which is interesting. People think it's Hinduism, but there's a lot of Christians, there's a lot of Islamic people, there's a lot of Hindu people, Sikhs, there's a variety of different organizations. So let's look at that. I'd probably share those beliefs, and I would identify myself as an Indian per se. So I might be a Hindi Indian as opposed to an Egyptian Muslim. as opposed to a Canadian Christian. Because I grew up in a particular rural environment where the traditional Judeo-Christian beliefs were on. And so what does that mean? Well, religion's a big thing. I have a certain belief in the world, a belief in divinity, a belief and a practice and behavior which is related to that topic. Now, if I grew up in, say, China, which is a communist rule, versus United States, which is a capitalistic democracy. It's actually a republic. It's a democratic republic, versus Canada, which is basically a quasi-military social democracy based on the Constitution of the United Kingdom, called the British North American Act, which is the foundation of the Canadian Constitution. There's certain beliefs inside of that isn't shared universally around the world. And because I grew up in that environment, I have those beliefs, I have that philosophy, I've gone through that education system, I've been exposed to that sort of stuff. And that is the lenses from which I look in the world. And it's very hard to overcome our environmental biases. It is very hard to think in terms of somebody else and to think of what their beliefs and what their philosophy and how they see the world is. And this is where we see all this conflict between quote unquote victims and perpetrators. And there is a very, very, very dangerous, limiting, disempowering, dysfunctional narrative that is going out through social media. And that is the idea that there are victims and perpetrators. And we are setting up reward systems. We are setting up communication systems. We are setting up belief systems that are based on this bias. And that was tested with horrible results in the Bolshevik revolution that happened in the Soviet Union, which was the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. And the results of that component was literally hundreds of million, probably about 100 million people died or were in prison throughout the Gulag. We had another 30 or 40 million that happened in China. We had all these different things that happened out of that belief system. So we tested that one. It didn't work out so well. Horribly, and also got us involved in this big Cold War and all that sort of stuff. It was an experiment. And I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not saying it was wrong. I'm just saying history has shown that those philosophies, we tested them, they didn't work. Or they worked to a certain extent, but they had some serious problems. Same thing is we had a democratic republic, which is not perfect. Winston Churchill once said that democracy is the worst form of government except when you compare to the others. But this leads to our environmental belief systems. Similarly, if I grew up in a place of a highly dictatorial environment that is run by, say, an African warlord, which I have to take up a gun against what I believe is my sworn genetic enemies, it's an easy belief system when half my family has been killed through some protracted war for some period of time. I've identified as a victim, therefore that gives me license to attack other people under the concept of social justice and social environment. And so I'm using this in a grand scheme. So how does that apply inside of, say, what I would say a highly advanced, civilized culture that we find ourselves in the Western world, as some people would say, that we have a privileged society, and we do have a privileged society. That is absolutely true, and those privileges happened. We were, in fact, to be born here, we were born into what I call the birth lottery, that we were born at this time, at this age, with these opportunities, this amount of technology, a basic set of tenets of operational law that took literally humans tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years to get to, okay? Like, there's been a lot of experiments in the rule of law, the rule of the world, the education components, the belief system components, the legal components, and all of these have coagulated into what we have today and creates our environment and creates our belief systems. These belief systems right now are being, and I'm not saying that this is perfect. This isn't a political statement. This is about understanding how you think and how you've come to the conclusions inside your life and how this relates to your success in life, in relationships, in business, in life, and how you see the world, and how hard that is to identify objectively and to remove subjective influence or subjective belief systems. And the difficult component, and one of the debates that's happening today in social media, where everybody has a voice, is that a lot of people who have the loudest and most extreme version of that voice are now cast in the role, undeservedly so, as the spokesperson for a wide swath of people who can be identified by their age, by their gender, by their economic level. And so what we have is a new form of tribalism. Now, tribalism was something that has permeated the human culture for tens of thousands of years and kept humans in a perpetual state of war for thousands of years. And we moved to city-states to have some sort of security, which went to nation states, and then universal organizations like maybe the United Nations or various other institutions on a world scale, or Doctors Without Borders or whatever. There's all these different global groups, that some which have nefarious agendas and some which have altruistic agendas. Okay, and to say that they don't have an agenda doesn't make any sense, because every group has some form of agenda. But the danger of identifying yourself with a limiting group is that you take on the beliefs of that group. So in my email, I said, are you a victim or a victor? And so I want you to ask yourself this question right now, and that is, do I feel that I am a victim in my life? Is there some place in your life that you feel like you're a victim? If you are, please write that down, and please identify if you identify with other victims within that group. And now that's not to say there aren't legitimate victims in the world. A victim is someone who has been subjected to a circumstance that is unjust, that is uncivilized, and that is inhumane, essentially. That's truly a victim. And there's various degrees of victimhood, whether you were suffering from a genocidal condition, which happened periodically and throughout history, horrible genocides, or whether that was some sort of injustice because of your religious beliefs, or because of your political beliefs, right? Those are usually the main components, depending on where you are in the world and what's happening, right? Or so there we have race, and we have gender, we have politics, and we have religion. Those are the four things that I think most of the people substance abuses. There are other cases of victimhood, victims of violence and things like that, which fall into other categories. But the second I identify with a group of quote unquote victims, I take on a set of ideologies and beliefs. Same thing happens if I go on to a victory kind of mindset, that I am the winner of a certain conflict or outcome. Now, let's talk about that. So your environment creates the situation, and we create an identity. So you can put environment at the top, and then our identity is created out of that. And out of that identity, we gravitate to, in today's world, they're trying to parry everybody up into you're either a victim or a perpetrator, and you're part of some sort of group. This is dangerous. It's dangerous because the second that you identify with a group, you immediately excommunicate yourself from other groups. And when you take on the role of a victim, you really, and particularly what's happening is there's a lot of conversation about rights. And one of the big things that happened after World War II was the idea of human rights. And that's why they had the Nuremberg trials with that sort of stuff, and the idea that the universal rights and the rights of the individual and stuff. But what a lot of people have left out of the equation when people ask for rights, and that is, what is the responsibility that comes with those rights? So rights in the world are, in a lot of ways, when you have a privilege or a certain right to something, there comes with it a concordant level of responsibility. And what that means is, for example, if you are, when I was 14 years old, I grew up in a very rural environment, and guns were a part of that environment. Everybody carried guns. I lived in the woods. There's a good reason to carry a gun, because you may be subjected to a situation where your life is being threatened by an animal that could essentially hurt you really bad or kill you. Bears, coyotes, etc. There was also the requisites of hunting, which was part. I'm a vegetarian now, but I was a hunter back then. So I'm not a vigilante vegan like a lot of people think. I'm not one of those people. I just choose it because I think it's a better form for my health. But the right, I had to go to and take a course. It was called the Hunter's Arms course. And that was to have the rights under Canadian law to own a rifle and to be able to use that rifle, to be that I had passed a government sanctioned test that said that I have earned the right, that I am reasonably responsible enough to use this particular weapon. Because that weapon carries with it the ability to kill somebody. When I was 16 years old, I went for my driver's license. Now, just to put this in perspective, about 1 million people a year die in car accidents. Way more than anybody dies from guns, ever. So at 16 years old, so at 14 years old, I was given the right to own a gun and to use that. When I was 16 years old, I was given a more lethal weapon, which is the license to drive a car. When I was 18, because in New Brunswick, you become legal age 18, I was given the right to be able to go into a liquor store or into a bar and purchase alcoholic beverages, which have been proven to impair your decision-making process. So cars, booze, and guns. Cars and booze kill more people on the road. Speed and alcohol and distraction, driving, kill more people than all the guns in the world. More people than the wars of the world. It was just people just die a lot from these things. Okay? But we've established patterns of rights to get these responsibilities. And I passed those tests. The right to have a gun, the right to drive a car, and the right to have alcoholic beverages. I don't drink now. And then I don't have a gun now. But there was points in my life where I had those things. I still drive a car. Now, in all those cases, I think the beauty of it was, if I wanted to have this right, I had to pass a demonstrable test to show that I had the beliefs, the operational stuff, that I could identify with how to use these technologies, which have advantages as well as disadvantages, in a responsible way. And inside of that, I subjected myself to an environment where I could cultivate what I would say positive beliefs, because this is the next part of identity. Identity is about the environment we live in, but is the beliefs that we come to a conclusion with, okay? And as we come to the conclusions of these beliefs, when we integrate a belief inside our lives, that is because of the environment that we subject ourselves. And now you're gonna say, well, how does this relate to my life? And this relates everything. I'm building you a case so that you can understand how that we come to the conclusions that we come to, and then what we can do if we're not producing the results we want, or how do we responsibly communicate with other people who may not share our beliefs, who may have important information that they could share with us because they have been subjected to an environment which my beliefs don't actually jive with, or their beliefs don't jive with mine. So now we can come to a reasonable discussion, a spirited discussion from our perspectives, and that we can learn something and maybe come up with a better model for everybody. Now, beliefs, I believe, categorize into basically two distinct categories. They're really three, but I'm going to focus on two of them. What I call limiting beliefs and empowering beliefs, and then there's kind of beliefs that are relatively benign. Like, I believe that David Gilmour for Pink Floyd is the greatest guitarist in the world. Well, that's not really limiting and it's not really empowering. It's just a belief. There's not a lot of consequences to that belief. It's just kind of an opinion. It's more of an opinion, but it could be classified as a belief. Now, if I go out and start creating a campaign and saying that because David Gilmour isn't recognized as the world that he's the greatest guitarist in the world and that everybody should believe this, well, now I'm setting up some polarity because maybe somebody else says Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin was the greatest guitarist ever to live, or somebody else. And you get, or Eddie Van Halen, or I'm really dating myself here about who the guys I listen to, but you see the difference between that. Now, when it comes to your life, when it comes to your business, when it comes to your relationships, when it comes to how you shape your political opinions or how you participate in your society or your community or with your family, you're going to have some of these beliefs that you've inherited from your environment, which is your family environment, your social environment, your national environment, that formed your identity, that creates these beliefs. And some of these are going to be very helpful for you, and some of them are going to be not helpful for you. And so the limiting beliefs, what I say, and they're limiting when you want to produce a different result than the environment that you found yourself in. Okay? And so they said the definition of insanity is, Einstein said, is doing the same thing and expecting over and over again, expecting a different result. Now, when you are in business, let's say you grew up in a blue-collar family like myself, there are certain beliefs, there are certain operational patterns that allow you to be a very successful blue-collar worker. And there's nothing wrong with that. My parents are that way. My whole family's that way. I engaged in that process, and I learned from that process, and I'm glad for it because it gave me some skills and abilities that I wouldn't have had if I didn't do that. However, I got to a certain point in my life, and I realized that, hey, I didn't want to have this belief anymore because the beliefs that were empowering me as a blue-collar worker, as a laborer, as someone that had to do physical labor, were limiting. That philosophy, that belief system was limiting to me if I wanted to have a successful business. And to have a successful business, I had to change some of my beliefs. And in order to change some of my beliefs, I had to subject myself to a different environment. I had to set myself with different people. I had to learn different ideas. I had to adapt different programs, different technology. I had to be able to unlearn the patterns of success in one area and relearn the patterns of success in others. And so I would say I adapted empowering beliefs relative to the outcome or the result that I wanted. Now, I'm the same person. My beliefs before led me to success in this area, which could be considered empowering as a blue-collar worker, but those same beliefs would be considered disempowering if I wanted it to be a more quote-unquote white-collar worker. Well, that's interesting, because how could it be that the same belief system could be interpreted one way or the other? Well, it depends on what's your goal. What is the outcome that you want? What is the result that you want to prove? Because your identity is made up partly by your beliefs, which is shaped by your environment shapes your identity. Your beliefs are part of your identity, and your beliefs determine the actions that you take. Those actions are either going to be limiting or empowering towards your outcome. And those beliefs are also going to lead to stagnation or to growth. If I'm going to continue to have the same beliefs I always have at the same point, I will make the same amount of money. I will date the same amount of people. I will have the same challenges in my relationships. I will see the world through the same lens if I continue to have those beliefs. If I'm okay with those beliefs, if I'm okay with how I am, if I'm okay with my results, and this is going back to you as well, if I'm okay with all this, I don't need to change a thing. But if there's a result that I am not happy about, or that I want to change, or that I want to make difference, I need to change how I think. I need to change what I believe. Because by changing what I believe, I'm going to be able to take different actions. In order to change my beliefs, I've got to re-identify who I am. And to re-identify who I am, I got to insert myself into a different environment. And that is going to lead to actions that move away from stagnation and towards growth. And I measure those results by creating an accountability system that determines what my results are inside of any of that stuff. Okay? Did I say anything about being a victim or a perpetrator? No, because those are segmentations which are only relative to a certain outcome. So if I want to be seen as a victim and I want to be rewarded as a victim. I need to take on the beliefs that somebody took action against me and that I'm a victim of that action, and I am going to appeal to that person or to some other authority, whether that be divinity, whether that be a court, whether that be a friends group or a social group, so that I can feel validated in my victimhood and that I can, quote unquote, get justice. Now, there is a big difference between justice and revenge. Okay? Justice and revenge. Understand the difference. And what most people are talking about today in the social justice warrior thing is not justice, because justice is illustrated with a lady with two sails and a blindfold. Justice is supposed to be blind. But if I identify with a group, a victim group, and I'm identifying a perpetrator, I'm not looking for justice, I'm looking for social revenge. And Gandhi said it best. If we follow the philosophy of the Old Testament, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, the whole world will become blind. At some point in time, you've got to embrace the idea of absolute, in-depth forgiveness, compassion, and understanding for all of those people, including your perpetrators. Now, that doesn't mean that that perpetrator doesn't get taken to justice if it is warranted. It just means that you forgive and you forget and you let go of the energy that is holding you in victimhood, because that energy field, that belief system, will disempower you and will never let you get to the results, because revenge is a dish served cold, best cold. And there is no joy in revenge. If someone that you loved has been violated, you can't get that back. If someone in your field has been killed for a belief or marginalized for a belief, you cannot change that outcome. And exerting revenge on the purported group or people or individuals who created that isn't going to solve the problem. It's only going to polarize people, because now they're going to feel like a victim. Maybe you don't know all the circumstances. Maybe you don't know all the history. Maybe you don't know what all the colluding factors for that decision was. Maybe you do. But the question is, are we so clear, are we so sure about our opinion that we're willing to ignore information that supports its opposition? There's that old thing about the reticular activating system, about what you focus on tends to happen. What you see, what you hold in mind, you tend to notice. My camera's churning over here. It's so excited. So sorry about that. All my Facebook people, try and control this as we get back. I got my little camera over here for those who don't know on YouTube. So let's talk about this when it comes to one of the most challenging things I think in life to take part in, and that is to engage in a business practice and to create prosperity at a level that wasn't kind of directed by our education system. Keep in mind this: our education system was a fantastic system for preparing people to work in an industrial capacity. It's been around for about 150 years with the rise of the manufacturing component, and the people believed that they needed to teach people to learn how to show up at a job, how to get ready to go to work, how to listen to an authority, and to pass a certain level of competency test. And if you did that, you would get out of grade 12 and you would become a wonderful factory worker. That job would carry you for the next 35 to 50 years. There were social institutions put in place that you would get a benefit, a directive at the end, because they recognized that people really couldn't manage their finances and they couldn't manage their health care. So the government took over for those things, mismanaged the money, and after 50 or 60 years, those systems are starting to fall apart and collapse, and people are wondering why. But at the end of the day, people didn't take responsibility for themselves. The other thing is that the education system didn't adapt and adjust to the current state. It is because this rate of change online and through digital media and through the advance of artificial intelligence and robotics and mathematical algorithms, it's created an acceleration of learning and growth that far outstrips what our education system is currently designed, or our medical system, our healthcare systems, or our political and our justice systems. We're simply interacting with too many people too fast at a rate that is changing at a dizzying pace. And these old organizations and institutions are under threat, under crisis, and there appears to be a lot of conflict amongst a variety of groups who are identifying with various, what I call identity politics, and playing, I'm a victim, I'm a virtue, or I'm an attacker, or this. And this is all part of the normal evolution of what's happened for the human condition. That's what's happening on humanity. You're seeing Homo sapiens evolve into a new species right before our eyes, right here on social media, around the world. We are connecting on levels before. We are challenging old ideas. We are learning at things. And there has never been a better time to rise out of whatever class or identity you would go to and become whatever that you want. We literally have millions of dollars worth of technology in our hand. We literally have incredible opportunities that never before. The internet has obliterated has obliterated all of these identifications, or whether it was gender. It doesn't matter what gender you are if you want to leverage social media. It doesn't matter what sexual orientation you are if you want to make a successful, prosperous business right now. It doesn't. It doesn't matter what your education environment or what your cost of education was right now, when you can go online and learn from the best experts in virtually any single field there is for next to nothing. Like, there's never been more opportunity in the world. There's never been more prosperity in the world. There's never been less people dying from war in the world. There's never been the amount of food supply to the world that we have today. There's never been more opportunity than there is now. There has never been a more equal place to play. Is it perfect? No. Is it getting better? Yes. And we need to honor and we need to excite that, and we need to understand if you're not producing the results that you want, it's not anybody's fault but yours. If you're not producing the results you want, it's not anybody's fault but yours. And you say, that's harsh, Wade. Yeah. But here's the value in that. The second that you own that you are a human in the human race, right now, a human, that's it. That's the only identity that you have. You are a human in the human family on this home called planet Earth. You're on the earth. You're a human. You say, I'm homeless. No, you're not. You're on planet Earth like the rest of us. I'm a white male. No, you're just a pinkish colored human. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. I got blonde hair. So what? I'm in my mid 40s. So what? Like, I'm still a human. Okay? Having a human experience on this planet called Earth. I have a home wherever I go because I'm on planet Earth. I'm part of the human family, so I have a family. When you adapt, and what happens to me in my life, what happens to me in the world is I'm part of it. I'm part of the conflict in the Middle East. I'm part of the conflict between genders. I'm part of the conflict or challenges between the rich and the poor. I'm part of all of these things. I'm with it. I am part of it. And by embracing that and understanding and listening to all aspects of that, then we might be able to work together and come to better solutions that everybody can benefit from. But if I'm in this, somebody's a victim and somebody's a perpetrator, I'm either what happens to that is sooner or later you become the perpetrator. You know, one of the things that concerned me about certain policies that have been out there right now. For example, Jordan Peterson has a great topic on this. For those who don't know who Jordan Peterson is, he's an intellect. He's Canada's most famous intellect. And he spoke up against the Canadian government, who illustrated compelled speech in the regards to gender things. It was a gender conversation. He illustrates it very well. Now, what happened was he said no, he didn't have an issue about calling anybody whatever name they wanted to be called by, or whatever identity they wanted inside his classroom. What he had an issue was the government creating compelled speech, which has never been done before in North American citizenship, and because we had earned that right through our constitutions, the Magna Carta, the Bill of Human Rights, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and all that, and sort of Canada, that this was an important thing, and that every country that took that away, it was a quick slip down into totalitarian regimes, and we had a variety of issues on that, which he's well studied and put out forth, and I think that was great. Now, what happened is he was characterized or mischaracterized as a misogynist who was going out against people of gender, or against women, or people who identified as a different gender and stuff. And this was terrible. He's not that guy. He's a clinical, biological, evolutionary psychologist with an extraordinary IQ and a fine ability to argue a variety of conditions. And he's super well informed in the areas that he works in, and he understands what areas he's not. And he's an extraordinary debater. Do I agree with everything he says? No, not 100%. Do I think that he's a very articulate and educated person who's done a lot of work? Yes. Now, the point of the matter is because he didn't see himself as a victim, though. He saw himself as a champion of a cause, and was subjected to an extraordinary amount of negative campaigns from an extraordinary amount of groups. Whether that was warranted or not is not the debate. But because he was willing to take a stand and to be attacked for that stand, and to adapt the belief system and to test his belief system in the most extreme environments possible, he ended up becoming the New York Times, the best-selling author probably over the course of the last 12 to 24 months, and has transformed from relative obscurity to wildly successful lifestyle and an extraordinary career, and the ability to influence thousands and thousands, if not millions of people in a positive way. That's an incredible story. Now, as opposed to whether you agree to his views or whether you don't, that's not the issue. What I'm going to suggest to you is, what can we learn from what Jordan Peterson has been able to achieve? And how do you apply this in your own life? Well, that is to find out what is your beliefs and how you came to them. How do you identify with those beliefs? And how do those beliefs allow you to take action or to take non-action? Are those beliefs limiting or empowering? Are your actions leading to stagnation, or are they leading to growth? And what is the results you're producing from your actions? And by doing that cycle, you can resubject yourself to different environments, to change your identity, to change your beliefs, so that you take different actions and you produce different results. And you keep going through that cycle over and over and over again, without getting polarized into victim perpetrator, without getting polarized into negative or positive. You're just seeing outcomes, and you are adjusting until you get to the outcome that you want. That's it. That is the whole psychological identification of how you become successful in changing anything that you want. Now, you may have to hire coaches. You may have to go to neuro-linguistic programming sessions. You may need self-hypnosis. You might need psychological counseling. You might need business coaching. You might need physical coaching. You might need to take an online course. You might need to get certifications in a particular area. You might need to spend a lot of time and study. You may need to drop certain friends and integrate new ones. You may need to get out of some groups and go to new groups. But the bottom line is, you can change anything you want in your life if you're willing to take massive action, subject yourself to a different environment, change your identity to what you believe, and those beliefs will lead to different actions, will lead to different results. And you keep adjusting until you get to where you want to go. And if you want to have more rights in life, you got to take on more responsibilities. If you want to have more money in your life, you got to take on a bigger responsibility. If you want to have more success in your life, you got to take the responsibility of learning the tools that you need to learn in order to be successful in the world that it is today. Don't say that you're a victim of technology. Leverage it. Take advantage of it. Become empowered by that technology. Become part of the history of human success. And that is when people say it can't be done, when people say that you can't get along with someone, or you can't develop something, or that's never been done before, or that's not possible, or nobody like that does that, or we're not those type of people, or you're not the right sex, or you're not the right age, or you're not the right height, or you're not the right gender, you're not smart enough, or you're not good looking enough, or you're not part of the in crowd, or you're not educated enough, or you're not whatever enough, because that's the big limiting belief that so many people have, is that somehow I'm not enough, because somewhere in your environment, somewhere in your beliefs, somewhere in your identity, you believe that you're not enough. And that may be true. You might not be enough today to produce the results that you want, but you can be enough tomorrow if you start taking different action today. That's my message to do this. And the bottom line is, if you want to change your life, you got to change your beliefs. You got to change your identity. And don't get mixed up in this ideology that you're a victim and somebody else is a perpetrator, and you have got to create some sort of social justice program against that perpetrator, social revenge program against them, and divert all of your energy and all of your resources and all of your enthusiasm and all of your intelligence and all of your abilities to go what? To get what? Justice? Revenge? Recognition? So that you can feel like you're enough? It's a waste of time, folks. I'm here to tell you that. It's a waste of time. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is to write these things down. At the top of the page, write my environment. And you can put victim or victor on top of that. What was my environment? What was my conditioning growing up? How do I identify myself? What rights do I think I should have? And what responsibilities do I have to ensure that I maintain those rights for me and my quote unquote group? How does my identity shape my beliefs? Are those beliefs limiting or empowering relative to the results that I want? And you can tell that by, if they're limiting or empowering, by the actions that you take. Are those actions or non-actions, which what I'd say non-actions or limiting actions lead to stagnation? You do the same thing. You're kind of in the grind. You're on the rat race. You're doing the same thing. You're going to work every day at 9 a.m. You're coming home at 5. You're on the commute in and out. You're on that whole cycle. You're on one of those roller coasters, right? If you're in that rut, are you working in those extra hours, or are you just watching entertainment? Are you putting healthy food into your life, or are you going out to the bar and drinking with your buddies? Are you taking the time to just watch social media with a bunch of garbage, or are you taking your time on social media to learn from people that are producing the results that you want to have in your life? See, there's nothing wrong with any of these matters. It's that you have to realize there are consequences to the action. Your rights and your responsibilities are determined by the actions, beliefs, identity, environment that you have. If you want more rights, you take on more responsibility. If you want more options, you could put it that way. And let's face it, money gives you options. Your environment gives you options. You have more options if you're in Canada with money than you do if you are in, say, China. Okay? So that's the reality. Environment leads to your identity. Your beliefs make up a great part of your identity. Those beliefs lead to the actions that you take. Those actions lead to the results. So the choice is up to you. What I'm going to encourage you is, do not get hooked into the victim-victor situation or the victim-perpetrator. Be a winner in life. And a real winner in life, a real winner, okay, is someone that when they win, everybody wins. That's the real winners in life. And so I would leave you with this. How can you find a way that everybody can win in your life? How can you find a way that when you win, nobody really loses, that everybody wins? And when you discover this in your life, in whatever you do, in wherever you are, and within the relationships that you find yourself, you move into a superlative state. You become a superhuman. You start to move into a way that allows you to take conscious action in an empathetic nature, that you're able to see the fallacy of negative behaviors. You're able to see and discern the attacks of low energy fields, of demonic energy fields, of things that are trying to take you out of the esoteric values that have allowed humans to rise up out of the thresholds of ignorance and uncivilized behavior into the absolute epitome represented by our greatest humans in nature. And the journey to those higher states of being, those higher states of capacity, those higher levels of rights and responsibilities, or you will, is paved by understanding this model and be willing to take apart any of your beliefs, any of your attitudes, any of your ideas in a way that will allow you to become super empowered, that will allow you to become superhuman, that will allow you to live a lifestyle that most people can never dream of. But if you can conceive of it, you can achieve it if you're willing to do it, the work. So I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to reach out, check out our YouTube channel, Waity Lightheart. We're on the Digital Republic, by the way. That's a little online program. I'm teaching people how to build businesses online. And the Prosperity and Health Alliance, of course, if you got us through here. So thanks so much. Enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed this no BS rant this week. I know I was fired up. It was a great thing. I thought about it for a long period of time. I wanted to get that off my top. Please feel free to send your comments, your posts, your emails, your messages, all that sort of stuff. And if you too want to change your life, you want to get involved maybe in your own business, you want to take the next step in your life, you're looking for some action, some guidance, some things you can learn, feel free to reach out to me. You know where to find me. I'm here on social media, Facebook, WadeLightheart.com, WadeLightheart@gmail. You know where I'm at. Look forward to hearing from you. Take care. Lots of love. And have a great night.